Hello, welcome to Search with Sean, and hopefully that intro worked. It's a new thing I'm working on. I'm not, I've never really done video that much, so hopefully you enjoyed it. And I'm going to be doing more of those sort of things. But yeah, welcome to Search Sean. This is part of the Chat with Sean series, where I talk to really great experts in the field of digital marketing, SEO, AI, whatever it may be. And yeah, today we've got a great guest, so I'll do some of the admin, the intros, etc. Then we get cracking. We've got some great topics we're going to cover today. Basically myself, so I'm Sean Barber, the SEO manager at Macmillan Cancer Support, as you should know by now, hopefully. And yeah, I've been working in digital marketing now for, well, several years and focusing on SEO for a good number of those. So yeah, that's me. And this guest I'm really excited about because I've seen them talk at Brighton SEO and followed them on LinkedIn for quite a while. And yeah, it's a real pleasure to have them on. So yeah, I'll just do a quick intro and then we'll get going. So yeah, today's guest you probably see is Sophie Brannon. And Sophie's currently serves as the Director of SEO at Rush Order Teas, where she brings her extensive expertise to drive impactful digital strategies. An award-winning industry speaker, Sophie has delivered insights at renowned event site, obviously Brighton SEO, and has contributed her expertise as a judge at the 2023 Global Search Awards. So yeah, welcome, Sophie.
I'm super excited to chat today because there's so much to talk about at the moment.
I know, right? I say it every week, but I do the news programs and I think, oh God, am I actually going to have enough to do? That's the work. I could basically, and I don't want to bore people, but just to give people some intro into that, I basically used to send my team a bunch of links all the time saying, read this, read this, read this. And they're like, can you not just put it in a video or something? And I was like, okay, maybe I will. And and then I thought maybe I won't have enough. But lately I could obviously do a show probably every other day, the way it's going. So yeah, it's crazy. Very busy. So so great to see. Obviously I've been, I saw you at Brighton SEO and fantastic speaker. So yeah, I'm really delighted to have you on. So yeah, let's get into it, I guess. And so we just touch upon it a bit, but what do you make of the current state of SEO or search in general, obviously?
It's definitely quite a difficult space to play in at the moment. There's just so many changes, as we said, like there's a new feature or a new, especially AI feature or something like that that's introduced. There's constant algorithm changes, like all these different things. And they're all happening, interestingly, or a lot of the time, at different times in different regions. So for like freelancers or agencies that work with like loads of different clients in all different parts of the world, like that's going to be a little bit more difficult for them as well. Google's obviously taking up so much more SERP space. We've got AI overviews. I work predominantly with the US. So like AI overviews have been there for a while, been testing them for ages, but now they're being introduced elsewhere. But as much as it's a little bit more difficult in terms of what people potentially refer to as like traditional SEO, I do think that does lean us a lot more towards like wider search opportunities. So like, for example, brands that used to significantly rely on, say, one keyword that they would drive the majority of their traffic, mostly for organic, things like that. That's not really the case anymore because of an AI overview, or Reddit is another one that might be taking up all of the SERP space, or a new core update comes along and wipes them out for a little while, rightly or wrongly. There's always arguments for both, and just kind of takes up all of that SERP space. But the way I see search now, and SEO in particular, is just that it's just opened up all of these new touch points. People are taking so much longer to convert. They're taking so much longer to make a decision. And that's the case across e-commerce. That's the case across SaaS websites, for pretty much any kind of industry you're in. The fact that we are now competing with a lot more of Google's features, or a lot more of like third party like Reddit ranking for so much more, and kind of things like that, really just then needs you to almost take your SEO hat off and think of like from a wider marketing perspective of how can I capture more traffic without relying on specific keywords, which, to be honest, is pretty old school SEO anyway. And then try and capture everyone within that funnel at all of these different touch points. And I feel like the way Google's changing and the way the search landscape's changing, it's like we're having to think a lot more like that. And if you're thinking more like that, then you're going to be leaning more into user experience. And that's ultimately what Google's after anyway, right? So yeah, definitely more difficult, but I think it's a good thing, and we're having to think like a lot more bigger picture.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously, when I've talked to recently Ray Sadiq and talked to my former boss, John Hudson, and should have said at the start, but I put a link somewhere of all the different chats we've had recently, because we talked to really great people. But yeah, they were obviously talking about the importance of diversifying your traffic and yeah, thinking of those different touch points, because, you know, like you say, just within the first page of search, there's so many opportunities, not just the normal traditional links, you know, the organic results in that block. There's tons of opportunities there. So yeah, that's really, and from, I've been a bit out of the game in the e-commerce world. What's the, especially in America, it must be quite interesting. What's the kind of main things you've been focusing on there in terms of e-commerce to try and, you know, gain some more visibility in those results?
I mean, ecom, I feel like ecom hasn't changed a huge amount, but we're definitely focusing on a few different things now. So for example, I've always found with e-commerce, and going back to my agency days, like working with a whole different bunch of ecom clients, that everyone just ignores their product pages, like their PDPs. Everyone completely ignores them, right? Because there's normally hundreds of thousands on an e-commerce website. As long as they've got a functioning checkout button and a decent picture, and occasionally a product description, occasionally, because that's not always the case, or at least one that's like not been copied directly from the supplier website, stuff like that. But people tend to just ignore it, and they'd always just target their category and subcategory terms or kind of pages, simply because they would be the main kind of pages that would rank for, you know, your big hard hitting head terms. So whatever that may be, depending on the e-commerce website. But what we're kind of looking at a lot more now is obviously continuing to optimize like our main pages. Like for example, with Rush Order Tees, like our custom t-shirts page will always be one of our most important pages, simply because like 80% of our sales are custom t-shirts. Like it is the hardest hitting head term that we kind of rank for, you know, all of these different things. But what we're also now paying a lot more attention to is our performance of our PDPs. It's optimizing our merchant center listings so that we show up for organic shopping results. And this is huge now, particularly in the US, and I'm sure it's also the case elsewhere as well. But we're seeing like 3 or 4 paid ads for these big head terms. Then we're seeing an organic shopping listings block, then a couple of organic results, then another organic shopping, then a couple more results, then organic shopping again. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. When we used to be, say, position 3, position 4 for custom t-shirts, like that was great, because we would be like above the fold, like everything is pretty, like the click-through rate was pretty good, stuff like that. Now, position 3, position 4 is like super far down. So if we're not then visible for like our organic shopping listings, then that's going to cause a lot of problems for us. So we're spending quite a lot of time basically just like making sure our feeds are all up to date, that there's no particular errors, things like that. We do run paid ads as well, so like just collaborating really closely with our paid team. But then just making sure like the basics on our product pages are done. So like making sure we've got really good imagery that isn't just like standard from the supplier website. Sometimes shooting some of these images in-house. We're very fortunate, quite a large business, so we have the budget to be able to do that. Obviously, smaller businesses, that may not be the case, but just kind of diversifying the imagery you've got, trying to include kind of lifestyle imagery, not just say a t-shirt or a mug or whatever that kind of looks like. Just try and get it a bit more engaging in that sense. And then things like the product descriptions, making sure they make sense. Like the amount of e-commerce websites that I've been looking at and kind of comparing against and getting inspiration from and things like that, you'll be so surprised at the amount that just have product descriptions that either don't describe the product, they are just not there, they're directly copied from supplier websites, so like they're not naturally going to rank for anything anyway. They're just really slow, like really slow loading, because they're just forgotten about. Like PDPs, as much as they're not necessarily going to drive a huge amount of organic traffic for ranking for, say, a product keyword, unless, you know, like there's a lot of high transactional intent there, but like volume wise, it's pretty low most of the time. But making sure that all of these points are covered, like, again, thinking about the touch points and all of the different journeys, your PDP page is where people are going to convert, right? That's where they buy from. So if you're not covering all of the questions that they've asked or like could potentially ask, haven't got decent images, haven't got good product listings, haven't got as much visibility for that, so trying to show up in those organic shopping listings and things like that, like, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. So yeah, for us in like the e-com space, I definitely say like focusing on the PDPs, and then just like overall site user experience and looking at how to better showcase all of our different collections or all of our different kind of product types, subcategories, how our search, like internal search functionality works, making sure we're displaying the best results for different searches, our navigation. It's quite funny because we sent out a survey to like a bunch of our existing customers, and they'd been purchasing on our website. Like, I think we narrowed it down to like our top like 100, top 200 customers, something like that. And they were like, oh yeah, like the best thing or the thing that we'd love to see on your website next is for you to sell hats and hoodies. It's like, we've been selling hats and hoodies for like 20 years. Like, what do you mean? It's because they couldn't find it, even though it was in the navigation. It's like, okay, so what could we do better to like really make that super prominent? Because even our existing customers who use our site regularly can't even find it. So yeah, all of these different things, like just from an overall user perspective, I definitely feel like my role has transitioned very significantly from like old school, let's chuck 1,000 words of content on a page, let's build some links to the page, let's fix core web vitals because that's coming out as a new Google update, which was obviously all the rage going back like 2020 or whenever that announcement was, to very much, okay, let's look at this as if I'm a user and I've never seen this site before. How can I make it better? And that's definitely the way I feel like SEO is moving to as well now.
Yeah, 100%. I think collaboration and that user journey is like 100% more in focus now than it was before. And you know, it's interesting, like the internal search thing is really something that's overlooked so much on many websites. I mean, yeah, I can't get into too many things, but it's definitely on our radar to improve at Macmillan. And I think most websites, you know, really underestimate how important those, because, you know, we obviously try and control the narrative as much as we can, but we can't 100% control where Google are going to send users. So if they do land on something they're not expecting, you want them to then be able to navigate and not go off the site and go on to someone else's site. So I guess in your world, websites like Etsy and not on the high street have probably, you know, created quite a lot of competition in that area in terms of customized stuff as well. So
definitely. And even like the likes of Canva have crept up in that kind of space. Obviously, Vistaprint being another big one, stuff like that. And that's a really big change in the search landscape comparing even a few years ago. We'd have like our main kind of not really localized competitors, but like main custom apparel and custom promotional product competitors in the US that we would target and that we'd be kind of trying to go up against. But then we've got the likes of these huge brands coming into play, like your Vistaprint, like your Canva, things like that. And we're like, oh, hang on a minute. Like, they're offering something similar, but also completely different as well. Just in terms of like, oh, they use a lot more templates. They use like a lot more just like pre-designed stuff, like their shipping options, their pricing models, like stuff like that. And that's all a huge consideration for us as well, like just from an overall business perspective, you know.
Yeah, no, for sure. And in terms of, actually, it's interesting because you're working in mainly the American market. Because we, like you say, we've only just, obviously I follow people from America and see all the stuff they talk about on LinkedIn. But in terms of AI overviews, because obviously there's a lot of controversy, it went down, like they took down a lot of them, and it looks to be much more improved now in terms of how they cite websites, how they display the information. Obviously, you've seen it probably a lot longer than a lot of us in the UK. Has it improved dramatically, or are we just wishful thinking?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that they've scaled it back massively. So I was seeing it on basically every single search I would do when this was kind of just before they rolled it out. It was when they were still doing all the testing and it was kind of announced initially. And I was seeing it everywhere when I was in like the lab tests and stuff like that. And it was actually quite concerning, because it would be, for like some of our main commercial or our main kind of transactional terms, there'd be this huge AI overview box with like no links in it, like directing anyone anywhere. If they did have links in it, it'd all go through to like informational posts. So again, using custom t-shirts as an example, we showed up fortunately in the AI overview, but it was going to like a blog on how much custom t-shirts cost, which obviously for us, custom t-shirts has always been a huge commercial transactional term. We're like, that's not like, we want our like landing page up there. We don't want like this blog, like great with showing, but you know what I mean? So that was obviously a big concern at first. And we're like, okay, cool. Like, let's look at how we can actually capitalize on this first, rather than just like all pure panic, which I think a lot of people did when AI overviews was first announced. It was, how can we strategize for this? So building out more informational content, like more kind of buying guides, stuff like that, that we didn't really do that well before, kind of putting a bit more focus on that. So that was kind of our initial thoughts. Obviously then, since it's rolled out, it's kind of scaled back quite a lot. We're seeing lots more, or like better kind of citations and like links out to different websites and things like that. But generally, to be 100% honest, I don't really see it that much. Even though I'm searching different terms every day, it's really only for like super informational, like they can summarize it in a few bullet points kind of queries, as opposed to like commercial or transactional terms. But despite that, like obviously that could change. It could get rolled out again and kind of cover more terms. I still think like a strong informational kind of, again, thinking about those touch points, all of those questions people are asking, like an informational like blog knowledge hub kind of strategy is always a good one to have for a lot of sites. Not suitable for every site, but for like a lot. And again, it just helps to capture these questions that people are asking. Like, I mean, for us, it's obviously like, how much does it cost? How does it work? How to use the platform, different styles, you know, stuff like that. But for all types of e-commerce sites, I'm sure there's a whole load of different kind of informational intent strategy that could be created that, again, may not have huge amounts of search volume, may not really have any, but just talk to your customer service team and find out what questions are actually being asked. Again, if you've got one, not all small businesses will, but I'm sure there'll be some sort of queries coming through, whether that's through your search, contact us forms, you know, things like that. And just build out content around that, because that will help too. But yeah, with AI overviews, definitely not as concerned about it as potentially we were at the start when it was first announced. But you just never know with Google. Like, one minute they've scaled it back, the next minute it's showing on everything again. So you just kind of have to be prepared for everything, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've seen it definitely showing up for more medical based terms around cancer types, but in fairness, they're covering it a lot better than they were, and it is citing the better websites. You know, before it was some sites I wouldn't recommend at the top there, but now it is, you know, more obviously ourselves and cancer research and NHS and that kind of thing that I would expect to see. So that's good. I guess the kind of the health side did concern me, because people's lives are at risk. It's not something to mess around with.
For sure. And it was like linking through to like Reddit forums and stuff like that, where people were just giving like the most unhinged advice ever. It was like, guys, we really need to fix this. So no, it's really good to hear that, like, especially in the health side of things, anything YMYL, like that should be fixed and that should be better.
Yeah, 100%. And I think in terms of search overall, I think they are, you know, it was at a state that it was very untrustworthy from my point of view. Even though I work in the field, if I was just using it as a user, some of the results are a bit like, don't know about that. And I would, you know, look, you know, try different search, you know, places to search and find the information. But now it does look like it's getting back to something I would expect from Google. And obviously there are other search engines, but we're focused on Google. And it does seem like, it does seem like it's getting somewhere back to where it should be. The only thing that I am concerned, like you just mentioned, was the Reddit stuff. I don't know how much of that you can. I know it's people's opinions, and that's really important, but people can stick anything on Reddit, and it doesn't mean it's true. And also, people are kind of perhaps playing the game and to try and show up on certain searches and stuff. I think that's already been proven in a few case studies. So overall, do you think search is better or worse than, say, it was a couple of years ago?
Maybe with the algo update that happened kind of November time last year, and maybe even before that with the helpful content update, I think that was around September time, I feel like something fundamentally did go wrong, because, as you say, there was loads of kind of spam results showing up. There was loads of stuff that was just either completely irrelevant, or you'd have, for kind of UK specific searches, a bunch of US sites ranking, and same vice versa. Like, there seemed to be something that just wasn't quite right with the way it rolled out. And even with like Reddit obviously having a spike, again, there's a lot of controversial opinion about that. And obviously then Google came out and said that they're going to be using Reddit to train like AI models and their LLMs. So there's obviously like, oh, is that, do you know what I mean? And I think just before that, there was, I feel like it was the Reddit CEO said that he was going to no index his whole site or something, like just before all of this happened, before they got their big spike. So there's so much controversy around it. My opinion on Reddit is, it's a good question. It's like, how do I phrase this? I feel like in a lot of cases, having Reddit show up actually does serve a good purpose, because especially for a lot of commercial and a lot of transactional terms and things like that, obviously forgetting health and like very critical things, just as like more general search, having more of that experience factor, obviously, we know EEAT, like having that experience in there, I think actually probably helps people make better decisions with their purchasing. Because you've got to think, if you're searching for like a general commercial term and all it is different brands kind of competing with each other and things like that, and it's all based on who's got the strongest backlink profile or who's got the best content, you know, stuff like that can all be quite easily manipulated. So having real life experiences with those brands also showing up in the mix of it, I feel like gives extra opinion to help people make the right purchases for them. Controversially, obviously, like health, things like that, like they should only be trusted resources showing. Like, we shouldn't see random people's opinions on, I don't know, the best way to cut off their own finger or something like that. Like, it gets very concerning when we start diving down those kind of like routes. Again, there could be some argument that Reddit might be helpful for people who have been experiencing the same condition or experiencing treatment at a certain hospital, you know, stuff like that, to kind of share reviews. I think I kind of see Reddit as almost like a separate reviews platform in a sense, because like, and it could be kind of used like that. So almost like a Trustpilot or something like that, where it just gives people a chance to kind of share like their own experiences and stuff. But yeah, I don't know, I feel like it's definitely a difficult one. They've seen another uplift with this algorithm update. Obviously Google's really prioritizing them at the moment that we've seen. It's definitely a difficult one to kind of say yes, it's a good thing, or no, it's a bad thing, because like there's arguments for both. I feel like a lot of the time you see Reddit in places where it shouldn't be, and that's the biggest issue. But yeah, I guess it, as you say, people are trying to now use Reddit to manipulate the search results. Like, if they do have something that comes up that's quite negative towards a brand, they'll start another thread about their brand, being like, oh yeah, everything's great and everyone's had the best experience, and get all their employees to start like writing all of these like subreddits and stuff like that about it. But yeah, I can't really give you like a straight answer about it, because it is all opinion. But I've seen it in some places that it is good fit, and other places where it's not. So yeah, I feel like it just needs to be reviewed a little bit harder, really.
Yeah, that's yeah, a good approach to take. And I think for me, there's definitely 100% a place for forums in the search results, obviously. But like with our forum, it's very heavily monitored, it's very heavily managed. I just don't know if that's the same with Reddit. That's the problem, because when I have used it, I've seen some very sketchy things on there that would concern me if, say, my children was looking at it or whatever, and it came up in a search result. And that's more to how do they regulate it? How do they monitor it? Because that's what happened with, obviously, X and stuff like that in the past. So, that's and Facebook, have had their own issues and been taken to court and stuff around it. So that's the concern I've got if they're going to do that. Like, I do think forums should be in there, but perhaps from sites that we know manage it and can prove their credentials of how they manage and monitor the content. And obviously it's funny with Reddit because they themselves and Google said that the partnership has nothing to do with their growth, which is the biggest load of
convenient timing though, right?
Yeah, it seems a bit I mean, that's not true, and I think most people but yeah, that's my concerns. I do think there's a place for it, but I think perhaps they need to prove, and like I say, it makes sense maybe in some cases, because people can vote, upvote and stuff on different threads, so I guess people can take signals from that. But yeah, I think with health and, like I say, your money, your life situation, they should just be ignored. In terms of Google overall, obviously they got tons of things coming their way. They got leaks, and they've got Google cases saying that they're monopolizing the market, and they may have to sell off their different parts of the company. What do you make of the whole situation? Do you think, say from the leaks, do you think we can take anything from that, or do you think that's just obviously there's two sides of the fence where people are just saying, oh well, it's old stuff and nothing we should really learn from it, it's just it's just here or there, and then there's other people saying we could learn loads and we could be changing and adapting our strategy accordingly. So from the leak side, and we'll get onto the court stuff in a bit, but from the leak side, is there anything you take it from that, or are you just kind of getting on with it?
Yeah, I feel like I read all of the leak documentation and all of this summaries and watched the webinar. I think it was Mike King and Rand Fishkin, wasn't it? Kind of went through that quite a lot. I didn't really take a huge amount from it, to be honest. I kind of was just like, well, isn't this just telling us almost what we already knew to a degree? I didn't really think there was anything super groundbreaking in it. I thought it was interesting that it happened. And the whole situation around that, and kind of people having enough of Google, and all of these leaks and things like that happening. In terms of needing to change your strategy, the strategy should always just be put the users first, and that's kind of what Google's always been about anyway. And there could be signals that you can take from it and things like that, but what the documentation didn't say is how much weighting each of these different kind of, I guess, factors or whatever they're referred to as actually have. So it could be that they're included in there, but it's got 0.0000001% impact anyway. So if then you take that, put all of your focus on one particular potential signal and stuff like that, you could just be massively wasting your time. Just build your site for users, make sure you're accessible, make sure that you're kind of showcasing that you are an authority in the industry, things like that. That's probably the most important thing. I think for me, the biggest thing that kind of came out of all of this was the brand focus and how important it is to build a brand. And I think that's, again, where search has now become a lot more difficult for smaller businesses in particular, because they don't have the budget to do big PR campaigns or kind of advertisements. They don't have all of this digital PR budget that all of these bigger brands have to build their brand, And again, that's where you kind of need to look at also other marketing efforts like your social media, your email marketing, and how that can intertwine with your SEO. But yeah, with the leak, I just didn't really think it was as groundbreaking as perhaps the drama around it seemed. But yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Obviously, I'm always open to discussion about it all. But yeah, I just didn't take a huge amount from it, simply because it just didn't show how much weighting there was against everything. So it's kind of just do what you're doing anyway.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think for me is, obviously you like to have confirmation of stuff that you've been thinking anyway, and you pretty much knew, for if you work in the industry for a number of years, that you've probably known anyway, but it's nice to get confirmation. It's a bit like, someone saying, oh, there's aliens, and everyone will be like, yeah, well, obviously, but it's just confirmation.
For sure.
But,
I get that.
Yeah, it's just and Mike King and others that have looked into it have brought up some, I guess it's like open up new, old but new conversations on different areas that perhaps people have been neglecting a little bit in the past, and it's opened up those discussions again. I think that's maybe a good thing. But yeah, it's just I mean, I haven't read them fully. I've kind of just watched like every single video ever about them that other people have been talking about. So I think I've learned enough about them. But yeah, it's there's some interesting stuff for sure. But like you say, the main point is that the user's the main thing, and you're creating good enough content that works well and is relevant, and you're doing all the other signals like brand building and that kind of thing. So yeah, but yeah, very interesting in terms of the. So go on.
I was to say, I think as well, like, I think it's more helpful for people who haven't been in the industry for that long. Again, as you say, to get confirmation, to make sure like they feel like they're doing the right things, stuff like that. I feel like people who've been in the industry for a while have either done a load of their own testing, or they've worked on enough websites to kind of figure out what works and what doesn't. Whereas obviously people who are quite brand new to the industry, or even just a couple of years in, like, they may not have had that exposure, particularly if they've only ever worked like in-house on one website, stuff like that. So I think that's where it helps quite a lot as well. It's just like, as you say, confirmation of these are things we could potentially and should be doing. So hey, I'm either glad I have been, or like, oh, okay, we need to start doing some of this. So I think that's where it really does help.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, obviously the people I follow a lot, I follow a whole range, but a lot of them have been in the industry for a while, and I think perhaps they take for granted that people know all this stuff, and they should just know it because they know it. And that's not always the case, as you say, that people all different levels of SEO and digital marketing generally. So for them, it's like, oh, really? I didn't even consider that could affect the way Google think. And also, it's just like I said to, I can't remember who I was talking to, maybe David Says, I can't remember which conversation it was, but we're discussing, just getting into Google's head, getting into their mindset even further. That's the really interesting thing. Like all this court case, all these leaks have really helped us even more understand the mechanics of how Google operates and their thinking behind things. It doesn't matter if it's old, even if it is old documents, they still thought like that at some point, and I doubt it would have changed too much since then. So that's definitely a good thing to take from it. And in terms of the court stuff, the monopolizing of the market, do you see anything coming from that? Obviously, me and Adair spoke about it last episode of the news, and we both feel like they're probably not going to get the major hits that they're threatening. They're probably just going to get some sort of small fine, and probably they have to share some data with their competitors. But do you have any other thoughts?
No, I agree. I don't think a huge amount's going to come from this. I know there's been a lot of speculation that they may have to sell off Google Ads and like this kind of thing. I can't see that happening. What I could see is like potentially smaller things, like on the new, like on iPhones and Android devices, not having Google Chrome as the default kind of browser, like little things like that, which obviously grand scheme of things probably isn't that little actually, but like just kind of those kind of like potentially backhand kind of contracts that they've got, and stuff like that may make a difference to those things. In terms of like what we do as SEOs and probably most other kind of like PPC stuff like that, I just don't see it making a huge difference, simply because like we're seeing Google has obviously dominated forever. We are seeing that search landscape change slightly. I think it's dropped from like 98% like dominance in terms of how much market share it captures down to like kind of mid 80% or something. But that's still huge, and like I can't really see Bing having that much of an impact. I can't really see obviously like DuckDuckGo and all those kind of like search engine alternatives really having that much of an impact either. I just don't, like, they're so big. Do you know what I mean? Like, even if the US court, I think all they did off the top of my head is that they're considering breaking up Google to address the monopoly, and that means that they're probably not going to do it, because if they wanted to do it, they would have just ruled it there and then.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and I think they probably feel like they've exposed Google quite a lot in this case, and that's been quite damaging to their reputation. But as you say, I think people talking about branding, Google have done such a great job in the last since they've launched to get into people's mindsets and their way of life that it's going to be very difficult to change this tide, the direction of the tide, because it's so relentless and Google's so dominant. Even if they change the default browser, I don't still think people revert to Google. I know I do. If I'm given a different browser, when I open up a device, I go Google. So
I get so annoyed if I have to use anything else.
yeah, the same. So I don't think, I mean, obviously a search GPT and that might do something. But then again, I don't know. I still think that people are going to be, they're going to be more probably cautious over a new search engine like Search GPT than they would with a trusted one like Google. You know, sometimes they say, you know, better the devil you know, and
Exactly.
yeah, and you know, especially if Google keep advancing the way they want with different ways of searching like Lens and Circle and those kind of things. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see the outcome of that one. And in terms of, we kind of touched upon this already, but has there been any change in your approach to how you're doing SEO and why that might be the case? Obviously, we talked about user first and stuff, but is there any kind of more direct sort of approaches you've taken on the site, or anything you're spending more of your time on than others now?
A lot of it is bigger picture stuff. Like a big focus of mine, more so in the last couple of years, has been how SEO is integrating with other marketing channels and how everyone can work together a lot better. Obviously, working in-house, I find that's typically a lot easier to do if you've got all of your departments in-house anyway as well. So like making sure that there's shared calendars of, like, say when the email marketing campaigns are going out, how we can adjust our landing pages, because if they're good for email marketing, they're good for PPC, then they should also be good for SEO, you know, stuff like that, and just really like collaborating on those kind of things. Any informational content that we're creating, like on one of the sites I work on, we built up, essentially it's called like an academy. So we just build out a bunch of different kind of informational content on there, like really specific to our product and like our service. And then we send that out via social media into like a community that we've built as well. So that's another thing too. And again, just that kind of cross collaboration. I think if you're working agency side, it does get a little bit harder to do a lot of that. But again, just talking to the client about their other marketing channels, trying to get in touch if they've got a PPC agency as well, or they've got in-house like email marketing, social media teams, try and get them involved in the SEO conversations, and just kind of build out more of an integrated strategy. And again, it goes back to that, there's touch points everywhere. Search is getting harder to kind of just rank for a keyword, and that drives all of your traffic. It's just not possible anymore. Like, all of these different things means you need better connection between all your other marketing channels. And if you're sending out something via email marketing that is completely contradicted by your PPC and your SEO messaging, then that's also like a branding issue too. And then all of this feeds into building your brand, as I mentioned earlier. Like, that's also a really important thing. Even if you can't afford like digital PR services or kind of doing commercials or whatever it is you do normally from a brand perspective, like having a solid, like integrated in like overall digital marketing strategy across all of your channels, like that will help to naturally build your brand and kind of give you access to wider kind of community and a wider visibility overall too. So I'd say that's probably how my approach to SEO has changed. I was always very much like, no, SEO is king and it must only be like whatever I do is the best, and like all your other channels are not important. But that's actually just not the case. You have to integrate with everyone.
Yeah, 100%. I'm the same, to be honest. And I think a few that I've talked to, like I say, Racer Deep was saying the same stuff, is that, you know, like you say, just on search alone, there's so many different, you know, paid, there's social now, a lot more social, there's all that kind of stuff. There's the PR stuff and through news and then loads of kind of ways that you can impact the search, but not just from that. Like you say, it's about building the brand and making the most out of because you don't, obviously we work in SEO, but we want the whole company to do well. That's the main point. We're hired. So, and the same, like John Hudson was saying on the last thing, if you're working agency side, yeah, you are the SEO leg of their company, but generally you could become like a marketing consultant, you've got the expertise and stuff. So if they're, you're basically there to make sure they perform better. So if you can work with all the other parts of the company, like PR, like UX, like social and paid, you're only going to improve each other's performance, and sharing data, sharing insights, you're only going to become more, improve the performance, improve the targeting, and you'll win. I'm doing a lot of stuff with a paid team and making sure that we're not, going after the same stuff when it's not necessary. They can then distribute that revenue into other campaigns that need it more. And we win because we get more traffic and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's all these sort of things, just having these conversations. But like I say, it's not always easy. And some people,
yeah, sorry, dog's barking, door's gone.
That's all good. But yeah, so we don't all have those facilities in place, but if you do, obviously, then start those conversations and try and work out some sort of process in terms of when content's being created, how you're distributing it, how you're all collaborating on it, how you're then sharing data, whether that's through dashboards or whatever. So yeah,
exactly.
Dog safe yet? Or
she's still going, but hopefully she's calmed down a little bit.
Cool. What kind of dog is it?
Cockapoo. She's gorgeous, but she is loud when the door goes.
Yeah, mine used to be like that, to be fair. So yeah, where we are to. So yeah, in terms of e-commerce, we talked about it a bit, but is there any particular like optimization tips that you would share right now? What's going on, especially around those PDPs that you discussed, and if you could just clarify what that actually is, if people aren't aware what they are. But yeah, that would be awesome in terms of like really focus on e-commerce, and any kind of tips what you would say right now.
My top tips for e-com, it's think not just about your category pages and your subcategory pages. Think about your PDPs, think about your blog, think about your homepage and what you're really pushing out on your homepage. Make sure you're adapting to seasonality. I see a lot of e-commerce sites like not adapt to that. So they essentially will just have the most stagnant homepage ever. And it could be winter and they're still pushing like summer clothes, stuff like that, which it seems like it may not be an SEO's job, but all of that will feed into it. So again, it's about that collaboration side. I think with our PDPs, like our product pages, making sure they're fast, making sure they're engaging, making sure you've got your prices accurate, because again, that's a big thing. Or even showing prices in the first place, like again, making sure that's all kind of factored in. Use lifestyle imagery if you can. People engage with that a lot better. Consider using other features if you can. So for example, a lot of companies have started to use like not just lifestyle imagery that they've created, but like UGC imagery. They'll take their own customers' images from Instagram and things like that and put that into their feed, into their feeds and into their product imagery too. And that's a really nice touch because again, it's showing that experience, showing that expertise side of things. And I just think it looks so much nicer. REI.com is a really good one for that. Like they do awesome things with their SEO. And then, yeah, just making sure that your hierarchy and your overall information architecture makes sense. Like you have your different products grouped under different categories and different subcategories. They're easily accessible through the site. Users can get to every page. Bots can get to every page. Again, technical, huge thing on e-commerce, like making sure crawlability is good, indexability is good. So yeah, I'd say they're the main things, like focus on your PDPs, get them up to scratch. IA, like site hierarchy, make sure everything's grouped properly. And then like don't forget some of your other pages, like your homepage, things like that. Make sure it's like fresh and it's up to date.
And in terms of PDPs, can you just clarify what what they are, just if people aren't aware. It's kind of definition of that.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry about that. Yeah, PDPs, I'm talking about product pages. So actually where users will then go from the category to the subcategory to your product pages, PDPs, and that's where they then check out. So hopefully that makes sense.
Oh yeah, cool. No, thank you. And in terms of like sitemaps and stuff, how important are they for e-commerce, and how should they be laid out, would you say?
It depends on the size of the e-commerce website. I see some that have, say, an XML sitemap that just stores everything. Others will have individual XML sitemaps within their XML sitemap. So it will categorize their categories, their product pages, their subcategories, things like that. And it will kind of like categorize those all throughout with their own separate ones. I do quite like that approach for a site that's really, really big, because I feel like it just helps to prioritize where Google's going a lot of the time, and like you can force submit each one of those into Search Console. So I definitely prefer that. In terms of a HTML sitemap, HTML sitemaps are interesting because I feel like they're always a bit of a tick box exercise for a lot of SEOs. I personally do feel like they're quite important in terms of if you've got a massive website and you've got a bunch of landing pages that kind of are not super accessible on your nav bar and things like that, which for a lot of e-commerce sites, they're probably too big to have everything on the nav bar. It's quite a nice place to store them and try and get them a bit more accessible. I actually built a HTML sitemap and changed it to, rather than just sitemap, to use cases. And like that actually just had all of our like landing pages that, again, that you couldn't find them, or you can't find them on the navigation because we prioritize our subcategory and category pages, but they're targeting like specific areas, like for company, like say company logo shirts or trade shows, you know, things like this, where we've built out separate landing pages for our email marketing that also target some pretty strong SEO keywords as well. That are not really like, it's more of an SEO strategy as opposed to like a product, like pushing our products and things. So I actually updated the HTML sitemap to just be like our use cases page, and then that linked through to everything, and that stopped there being like a bunch of orphan pages too. So yeah, I feel like with our sitemaps, like your XML is always the most important. Make sure everything that you want Google to crawl and you want Google to find is in there. One issue I had before was all of our parameter URLs were living in our XML sitemap as well. So we ended up having like a ton of our like parameter pages also being indexed, and like duplicate content issues just ended up being a nightmare. So just only include the pages that you want Google to crawl and to index in your XML sitemap, and your HTML sitemap should basically include everything that you want users to find. And you can call it a sitemap, you can be creative with it, it doesn't really matter, but stick that in your footer as well. So that's another top tip. Don't just ignore it. Leave it there, make sure people can find it.
Yeah, 100%. And in terms of that, we touched upon it earlier, but especially when I worked in e-commerce, the internal search data that you collect can be like a gold mine in terms of actually understanding the kind of products that users want. And you may not even, you know, have it as an actual product, but it's going to give you great ideas on, you know, like we said before, it's not part of our job. And like you touched upon, it was really good in terms of like the website overall. Yeah, that you may not think that's an SEO job, but your numbers at the end of the day will still count in terms of people having a good experience on the site and checking out or downloading something or whatever you may be. So that's still important. And if you can find a kind of a trend that people are searching for or a product they desire, and you go to that particular team and you say, look, I'm finding this, and they create and it does really well, that's obviously going to be great for SEO and great for the business overall.
100%. And I think people forget that as well. Like SEO is not just about like traditional ranking factors. I always do lots of air quotes and stuff like that because it's just, yeah, like there's so many things to think about with SEO, but keyword density, you know, your page titles, your meta descriptions, like header tag structure. Oh, is there more than one H1 on the page? Like these are not really the things that are going to move the needle necessarily, and shouldn't just be the things you consider. Because as you said, if there's strong signals that people are spending a good amount of time on the page, or they're converting really well on the page, and you know they're actually engaging with a particular page that you've created or that someone else has created, that will ultimately have a better like impact on your overall SEO as well, because if users are happy on your site, then Google's going to be like, oh, hey, hang on a minute. As much as it's not a defined ranking factor as such, like I definitely feel that if there's strong engagement on a site, Google's definitely going to prioritize it, because all Google are trying to do is to provide the best experience for their searchers and provide them with the best results. So if people are spending a lot of time on a page, whether they've searched that certain query or not, like naturally that should send signals to Google that that page is the right fit for users and that users will like it, right? And then going back to what you were saying about like using the search bar and kind of using that to inform your strategy, absolutely. And that's something that gets forgotten about so much. We use it not just for SEO, but we use it to actually inform our product merchandising teams. We say, hey, like we've had a huge amount of searches for this particular brand. Do any of our suppliers like sell it? Can we get it on the site? Yeah, we can. Awesome. Let's get it up. And that's another big win for us. And then also to see if people are struggling to find a specific product or find a specific brand and there's a huge spike in demand for it. A big example of this for us was obviously Stanley, absolutely huge in terms of like their tumblers. Like I own like a fake Stanley because like they're very expensive, so I got like mine from TK Maxx, but like everyone's got one, like loads, especially girls, like all of us girls have got Stanley Cup, right? Or like some version of it. Stanley actually really struggled with their stock after they had a huge spike in that traffic. There was like a TikTok video that went around about the Stanley Cup not burning down when the car did and the water still being cold, you know, like that kind of thing. Huge spike in demand. We had loads of searches for it. Stanley actually ran out of products. Like they couldn't sell us like through their suppliers. They couldn't do personalized Stanleys anymore. So after that happened, there was another brand called Awala that then started seeing a bit of an increase in traffic and an increase in trend because people couldn't get a Stanley. So they tried to get the next best thing, which ended up being the Awala. We didn't have any Awala on our website, but then we started getting it through our search bar. Like people were talking about it a lot more, getting asked questions on social media, stuff like that. So then we ended up building out an Awala landing page. We've got the products on our site, like, you know, stuff like that. And that's a whole new SEO strategy right there. Just totally informed by demand behind a particular brand or a product and people using our search bar to try and find it and they couldn't. And that's literally how that all kind of came up. So yeah, definitely like use that search bar as much as you can because that can inform so many different avenues.
Yeah, 100%. And also with like and a similar vein as you touched upon is the customer service side, you know, it's a gold mine as well, you know, and often overlooked, you know, actually talking to your customer service team, what are people asking? Because it, you know, it depends on what sector you're in. Obviously, sometimes of us they call up for emotional support, which is something we can't offer on just a website as such. But if they're asking questions that should be found on the site, then obviously we're either not answering it or we're not making it easy enough to find. So again, that's great insight to say maybe we need to highlight this more on the site, or maybe we're not answering it properly. Or so, you know, again, both of those along with Search Console stuff, but obviously Search Console is a great resource, but it also, you know, only tells you part of the story. And then obviously when they get to the site, they may behave differently. And that's when you really know what they want when they search on the site. So yeah, no, it's great advice. And obviously you talked about the importance of the Google shopping as well, and making sure that's all connected and optimized. I guess that's a really important part of e-commerce as well these days, right?
Absolutely. I think with the prominence of organic shopping listings in search, making sure that you've got your merchant center kind of all connected up. A lot of platforms like Shopify, for example, and e-commerce will just you can basically set up your feed and it will automatically update everything, and it's super easy to manage. Like if you're a small business in particular, small e-commerce site, like get on Shopify if you haven't already. Like try not to use these really overcomplicated platforms. It's not necessary. And then for other sites, like a nice WordPress is always good as well. Like if you ever ask Jono about platforms and whether you should use headless or whether you should use like some sort of complex custom built CMS, he will always argue to death like WordPress is the one. So yeah, if you can do that as well, awesome. But there's loads of feed like APIs and stuff like that that will just do it all automatically for you. If you change a price, it'll update the price in the feed. If you take a product down, it will remove the product, stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be a complex kind of task at all, but get it all populated, get it optimized, like make sure your descriptions are accurate, stuff like that. Because being in those organic shopping feeds, like we've seen such a huge amount of clicks come through from that just from being visible now, and even like as a revenue stream in comparison to even just going back in a year or so. So we definitely recommend it.
Yeah, and obviously, like with most things, like with structured data, the more detail you can put into it, probably the better it's going to perform. So yeah, definitely. Even in the early days when it was kind of just coming into play, when I was in e-commerce, it was still a really great, additional resource to get more traffic into the site. Probably a bit less competitive back in the days. It was quite a few years ago, but yeah, it's still a great tool. And I mean, I probably wouldn't have used Google Shopping a couple of years ago. I just wasn't really didn't know if I could trust. And the bigger brands, it seemed to be on there. But now I definitely, I do go through it now for certain results. So yeah, it's definitely changed in that regard for me. In terms of just coming to the last few questions, hopefully you're all good still. Cool. And so in terms of like internal reporting, this is always like a interesting topic. What's the kind of your preference? How do you go around it in terms of like internal SEO reporting?
Good question, because like there's so many kind of ways that you can do it, whether it's a dashboard, whether it's a presentation, stuff like that. I'm very fortunate in my in-house role is that like Mike, who's our CEO, actually done the SEO himself. Like when he was first starting the business, he actually learned it all himself, stuff like that. So we've got great buy-in for SEO, like from the top down. So I don't really have a huge amount of problems with like kind of barriers, stuff like that. We have a lot of support. However, from my agency days, like I've worked with a lot of companies that just have, especially bigger corporates like American, UK, things like that, like the really big complex companies that have like a marketing team, a marketing director, a VP of marketing, stuff like this, and they have very little SEO knowledge between them. That's when internal reporting gets very difficult, and it has to be really kind of like as simplified as possible while it's still also showing everything that you need to kind of show to say, hey, I've actually done a good job, please don't pull budget, essentially. So I had a client, my agency days, that we had a lot of back and forth on reporting, and it actually taught me a hell of a lot about internal reporting and like the best ways to do it. Now, I'm very much and have always been, let's build a 50-slide PowerPoint presentation and show how awesome every little detail is and how good it has been. And I will sit there and I will talk you through that for 2 hours to be like, hey, look at this page, look at this work we've done. And he would take these reports and he'd have to basically present them back to his board to basically, like, he was a really big client, had a board of directors and stuff like that. And again, board of directors, very little marketing knowledge, no SEO knowledge at all. The way I was taught how to do it, literally just from working with him, was take your 50-slide presentation, condense it down into 1 slide, and that is it. Like literally top level executive summary. These are the main points. What went well, what went wrong, how we're going to fix it, what we're doing next. And that's literally it. A lot of companies and a lot of, let me take a step back a minute. What you need to do is you need to consider who you're reporting to, first of all. So obviously, like I've kind of said there, 1-page slide about, like, for people who don't really know what they're talking about. If you're reporting into people who do know what they're talking about, and like they do know SEO or they have an SEO background, they're probably going to want to know a little bit more about like what pages are performing well, like what those kind of main top level metrics are, like what we're doing from a technical perspective, more of the in-depth stuff. If you're reporting to people with very little knowledge, they basically just want to know, against how much we're putting in, how much are we then getting back out of it? Like revenue, bottom line numbers is always going to be their top priority. It's always going to be around budget. And even if within, obviously we know SEO takes a lot of time. If they're investing, I don't know, 5k a month, 10k a month, chances are they're probably not going to get that back out the first month. But 6 months down the line, we can start projecting that and being like, hey, like these are the things that we are doing with that budget, like, and this is how, like, this is potentially what you're going to get out. Here's like a forecast, you know, stuff like that. Think about who you're presenting to, who you're giving the reports to, and that will really dictate like what level of depth you're going to go into for that. So is it going to be a 1-slide executive summary? Is it going to be a 5-page quite detailed document? But what I would always say is top level for everyone: organic traffic, organic revenue and conversions, and essentially what work you've done, insights and recommendations. So what you've done, what that's achieved, and where you're going next is always the easiest way to report, whether that's internally to clients, whatever that looks like. But just make sure it's totally dependent on who you're giving it to. So you're not handing over a 50-slide deck to a board of directors that have 2 seconds to look at it, because it's just never going to fly.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, I'm in your boat where I probably would, if it was my choice, do like 100-page detailed report with all sorts of stuff on it, going into great detail. But yeah, similar to you, in my agency days, I learned that everyone's at their own different levels and have their own demands. And obviously, when you work, like you say, when you work in agency side, it's about getting to know your clients and getting to understand their needs and what they require and kind of their level of knowledge and take it from there, because it will vary depending from client to client. In-house, I try to I try and give like different options. I try and build dashboards so they've got like a live feed, like say, so they can go in their own and discover and find out easy to read sort of information, top pages, and like say the revenue figures, conversions, and whatever it is, downloads, whatever it is. Then also I do like monthly stuff where, and like you say, because people are different levels, I try and visualize a lot of it so it's easy to kind of take in. Not all just text and like numbers, but there's some visual side to it as well, which you can use ChatGPT and stuff. It's really easy to do, and then also, like you say, go into kind of what we've done and that kind of thing. But I think also, you can, especially, well, from both sides, but especially in-house, you're going to help the other stakeholders. You're going to become quite an important part of their process, because I know a lot of my stakeholders hold out a lot for my monthly reports, because they learn about trends in the market, trends in search, trends in internal search, and what pages are doing well, what pages are suffering, and that kind of thing. Key terms that are picking up, key terms that are dropping off. And they find that, because it's going to spark ideas from their side as well. If they're in product management or, stuff like that, they're going to think, oh, we can give them some ideas or something they need to work on.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you touched on something really important there as well. It's like that visual aspect of it. Make it as visual as you possibly can, because like a big list of numbers to a lot of people is just going to be confusing. Color coordinate it, like big graphs, things like that, just so it makes sense a lot more. But yeah, you're so right. With like a lot of stakeholders, they learn so much from our reporting. So just making it as clear as possible, as transparent as possible, never being afraid to say it's been a bad month as well. Like, don't lie. I think that's the biggest thing I saw in agency side, was just the amount of reports that would go out, and it would be, oh, like we normally report quarter on quarter, but let's report year on year, because quarter on quarter is like red and it's down, but year on year looks really good. So like, let's change it this month, and then we'll change it back again next month. And, just like really silly things like that. Like, it's okay. Like, it's not always going to be an upwards trend. Like, and just explain the reason behind it. Is it because like the developer didn't implement what it was that you needed to be done? Could your internal stakeholders then help to push the development team to be able to do that and kind of clear up some of their backlog? Or is it that it's not a priority right now compared to these other business initiatives that we're doing, so we're actually going to pivot our strategy from what we first had? Or is it because we didn't get content approvals back from the key stakeholders? Or is it because we're waiting on legal to sign things off? Or is it simply because seasonality, like it happens? Like, we've had a bad month. That's fine though, because like last year we also had a bad month. But it's still better than last year's bad month, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, just like don't be afraid of reports and don't be afraid of internal stakeholders as well. Like just be honest about stuff. It doesn't need to be scary.
Yeah, 100%. I saw that myself, and there can be so many things like search. We're not in control of everything. You know, we can't really, obviously, we're in somewhat control of the content and stuff, but other people contribute to it. There's all things going on a website, especially if you're working on the agency side, that you probably won't have any idea what's going on. And they're changing things, they're doing this, doing that can impact your performance. There's obviously algorithm updates and so much going on that you don't have any control of. And if you had a great year last year and your year on year is bad, doesn't mean, like you say, it's a terrible result. It's just not as good last year, because last year was really, really good. And maybe the previous years before that, it's better than that score. So you have to put it in perspective. Like I say, don't be afraid of doing that. And I guess and also, you know, sometimes, you know, playing devil's advocate, sometimes it may be good to be sometimes slightly vague, because it invites questions. I actually enjoy stakeholders coming to me and asking questions, because that means they're engaging in the SEO discussion. They're learning more about SEO. And if you just, so it's not always a bad thing that people come to you and ask you get involved in it if they're not quite clear. So obviously encourage that as well, is a good thing. In terms
making
of
sure that people understand it, that's the most important thing. As long as it's understandable to whoever's getting it, that's and always go through it with them if you can. Like agency, in-house, whatever, don't just send a report and like hope for the best. Always run it through with them, because as you say, it opens up that conversation. It gives them a chance to ask questions about things. And it just gives you a chance to say, hey, look how awesome like I've been this month. Like it's great. Things are going good.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, if you're going to use sort of terminology that may not be, that's probably why I fell into issues in the past. I just, you know, in the SEO world, there's so many abbreviations, so many technical terms,
For sure,
and we just presume that people know these things, and they don't. Even, you know, some people, everyone's knowledge is different, as we discussed, and even simple things like domain authority, people may not have any idea what that is, so you can't take that for granted. So put explanations on all your reports and what things mean and stuff is a good way forward as well. And in terms of going forward, moves us on to our kind of, well, we've got just two more questions. In terms of the future of SEO, where do you see that? Do you see things massively changing, or you think it's just going to continue on this trajectory for a bit?
We've seen a lot of change over the last year or so. It wouldn't surprise me if we get a few more kind of tweaks to AI overviews and kind of other different AI features that come in. I do feel like that was initially a bit rushed. So I feel like there's a lot of work for Google to be doing on all of their AI overviews and how they're displayed and, you know, things like that. They've only just started rolling them out kind of worldwide, really. In terms of the future of search, I feel like SEO is always going to be important. I feel like it's definitely going to be harder in terms of like, you can't just, you can't buy a load of backlinks anymore like you could like 10 years ago and be like, hey, now my site ranks great, awesome. It's just literally like never going to fly these days. So SEO is definitely harder. I feel like we need to be a lot more collaborative with other channels, which I know I've kind of talked about quite a lot on this, but that's going to be a huge thing for SEOs in the future. It's just like overall marketing, like all of these different touch points, be more visible everywhere from every single point in the funnel, like from the top of the funnel, informational stuff, all the way through to the transactional, and making sure that your product pages are like top notch if you're ecom, or if you're like SaaS or your kind of lead gen side of things, making sure that your landing pages are like really engaging, answer all of the questions, you've got main call to actions everywhere, things like that. But yeah, I feel like we'll see more AI stuff coming in for sure. I feel like we'll see bigger, or kind of about the same probably size, algorithm updates coming in, but may not always roll out quite right the first time. We've seen that happen the last couple of ones that have happened. But yeah, I think focusing on the brand, focusing on cross-channel collaboration, and just making sure everything's done for the user, as opposed to let's try and trick Google into ranking our website. And that will be what search becomes. And that's what it should have always been, really.
Yeah, I agree. I think literally now, hopefully we're getting to a stage where you're just going to get rewarded for doing the right things and not trying to cheat the system, which has obviously had its rewards down the line in the past. And I think those days hopefully are coming to an end, and the people with the best content delivering the best service will be the ones that see the best results. But obviously there will be the bigger brands will still probably dominate for a good while, because that seems to be, but that kind of pushes you to then try and create that sort of brand. But obviously, like I say, not everyone's got those resources, unfortunately. But and yeah, and we kind of touched upon it with the chat I had with John last week, and in the sense that, as SEOs, this gives us the opportunity now to go out and learn more about the other channels and about digital marketing in general, not just by focusing on the SEO world, because we're going to have to know more and more about these different channels as we work with them. And they're going to start talking about things about what the hell is that? So, there's all those other channels also moving quite rapidly from my understanding. So we need to be more kind of aware of digital marketing generally, like you say, not just be siloed in our SEO world, which obviously is, it's an interesting world that we live in, but there is stuff outside of it.
We spent so long as SEOs trying to prove that SEO was the best channel, and now we're like, okay, I guess we probably should collaborate with you guys too.
Yeah, I think they feel the same as well. I think all channels. It depends on what company you work for, obviously, but I think a lot of them that I come across, they're siloed. Like most of them are siloed and just do their own thing, and then collab when projects kind of makes sense to collab. But really, everything as we discussed in this should be a collaboration. And I guess just to finish off, and obviously I put all your contact details in the description so everyone can get in touch with you and find out what you're doing. But generally, is there much coming up from yourself? Any talks, any other interviews, anything like that?
Quiet year for me this year. This has been like the first year in ages that I haven't done loads of talks and loads of like podcasts and webinars and things like that. So actually for the rest of this year, not really much, but going into next year, I'll be back at conferences, like talking loads, hopefully, across UK, hopefully US as well. I'm trying to get a few talking gigs there. It'll be really fun. And yeah, just be about a bit more generally, because I've been pretty like locked away this year. But no, definitely from next year onwards, we'll be out and about a lot more. So hopefully you'll see me.
Cool. Hopefully I probably wouldn't go, but San Diego, I know they're doing an event there now. So yeah, cool. No, thank you for being on the show. It's been really great to be speaking with you. Like I say, I've been watching your progress and what you're doing. It's been really impressive. So yeah, it's been great having you on, and hopefully we can have you back on soon.
Having me, Sean. It's been lovely chatting. There's been loads to cover, so yeah, it's been awesome, and hopefully be back soon.